hello again. It's that time of the week, and I'm very pleased to be in front of the camera once more because I really enjoy these sessions. It's a privilege for me to meet experts in various fields, and it takes me out of my normal activity because, as you know, my job is publications director of Atheist Alliance International. And that involves making videos like these, but also making articles. I publish daily on Patheos. I blog there. Maybe we'll take a look at that later on. And I also edit the magazine, the journal, the quarterly journal, Secular World, and the newsletter and sundry other things, which keeps me fully occupied. But tonight we have the second ever psychologist on the show. Formerly, we had an evolutionary psychologist, Dr. Ed Morrison from Portsmouth University. But today we have Dr. Darrel Ray, who's currently resided outside of Kansas, the city of Kansas. Here he is. Hello, Darrel.
Hello, John.
How the devil are you?
Technically, it's Kansas City. It was 150 years old. It was called the city of Kansas. So you're 150 years behind times here.
Well, of course, I blame Kansas because it's named two things by one name, a state and a city. So it's deliberately confusing.
I'm sorry. I will send that on to the authorities.
Well, thanks. Yes. Now it's a bit of a strange week we're at the end of, isn't it? Some things have been happening. We've had the horrible, the barbaric beheading of a teacher just outside Paris. And actually, I blogged about that on Patheos a couple of days ago. And at the same time, in the same week, we've also had the Pope declaring that suddenly it's okay to get married if you're gay. What sort of a going on is this?
But you can't have sex. Still, that's my assumption there. But you know, the gay sex is not allowed, but gay marriage is, evidently.
Well, even so, it's odd, isn't it? Because apparently now you can get married if you're gay and have sex, but you still can't get married if you're a priest.
True.
Or even be a woman if you're a priest. So this is just too confusing for words, I think.
I think our dear Pope is trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's confused.
Yes. Seems like it. So, Darrel, I introduced you as a psychologist. I said you're the second psychologist that we've had on the show. Can you, for the benefit of our audience, explain the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Well, the distinctions are fairly simple and at the same time can be a little more complex. A psychiatrist is at least within the most United States, it's an MD, a medical doctor, and they have medical training. They get the full medical training 4 years, and then they move on into their specialty, psychiatry, which allows them to assess mental conditions and administer drugs, prescribe drugs. A psychologist has minimal medical training and generally goes through roughly the same time, 3 to 4 years of training, and they take on a specialty after their primary academic training. But they do not, their training is around generally talk therapy or some other. It can be experimental psychology too. It could be social psychology. It could be evolutionary psychology. There's a lot of specialties you could move into. In my case, I moved into counseling and then to clinical psychology, which is, what a large number of psychologists do because they want to practice and work with people. So I never could, and no one in my position would, or rarely would be allowed to prescribe drugs. There are some entities, some states, some countries that allow psychologists with some very special medical training to prescribe drugs, but that's still pretty rare. And that's not our main focus. Our main focus is to help people deal with the stresses of their day-to-day lives through methods and techniques that don't necessarily involve drugs. Although we work very closely with psychiatrists because many people need the drugs to stabilize themselves and then move into learning cognitive skills for coping with stress and things like that.
Mm. So you're more in the sort of either the Freudian or the Jungian field, are you, rather than than giving out medical treatment?
Well, my answer to that is not only no, but hell no.
I see.
I don't. Freud and Jung have been dead a long time, and their theories probably should have died with them.
Yes,
we don't find a lot of evidence-based. There's virtually nothing evidence-based about Freud or Jung. It's not to say they didn't contribute or ask some questions that needed to be answered. It's just they didn't answer those questions.
Yeah.
Today we have a myriad of tools for study.
Yes.
For assessing neurology, for looking at the impact of certain kinds of treatment. And we know that the techniques and methods of both of those great men, and they have some great books. And I mean, The Future of an Illusion is, I cite it in my own book, The God Virus, several times. It's a really well-written book about the psychology of religion. But for treatment purposes, you would be a quack, and I'm going to say this, and no one can. You would be a quack if you're using Freudian or Jungian methodologies, and you will probably get hate mail for me saying that. But we in the current 21st century of psychology use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness and dialectical behavioral therapy, and these are all things that came much later and are proven. I mean, they're not just theories any longer. We have really good evidence they actually work.
Yes.
So,
well, of course, as you said, those guys were a century or more ago, and they were in the infancy of the discipline.
Right.
And they were virtually making it up as they went along, and they didn't have any of the modern equipment, did they?
No, none at all. And they were speculating. There was no knowledge of what's going on inside the brain. None whatsoever.
No. So another interesting person in a similar field that we've had on the show in the past is Professor Sophie Scott. I don't know whether you've heard of her. She's at one of the London colleges, and she's a neuroscientist, which is, I think she described it as like psychology on stilts or something.
Yeah. Right. Well,
I remembered what she called it: weaponized psychology.
Right. It is. It very much is.
Yeah.
And I during my generation, as I'm coming through graduate school and postdoc stuff and all, there was just hints of neuropsychology, and we were just learning what dopamine does and serotonin and all those, and why certain drugs work and don't work. Well, now today we've got all sorts of tools, not least of which, of course, is the MRIs and other ways to literally look in the brain as it's working and see what's going on.
Yeah.
So her field is really the cutting edge.
Yes.
And from her field, neuropsychology, we clinical people are able to assess whether one of our techniques works or not.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the value that neuropsychology is bringing to the table. It's something that, clinical psych couldn't do 20 or 30 years ago, and now we can.
Yes. It's wonderful, the pace of development.
It is. Yeah.
Something which came up in a more recent show that I hosted was about some development in a Japanese research laboratory where they've managed to use, I think, functional magnetic resonance imaging to actually see what the brain is seeing. Have you met this? I
No,
can't,
I
can't
have
remember
not.
the name of the university at the moment, but they've they've detected the electromagnetic impulses in the sight center and managed to decode it to make a picture which roughly resembles what what the patient, or what the what would you call him? Not the
The
victim.
subject, the subject.
The subject. Thank you. The subject is looking at. Now that is fantastic, isn't it?
It's pretty revolutionary. But we're seeing in neuropsychology that the knowledge base, as in many areas of science, is exploding. It's more than doubling every year. So
Mm,
I have
mm,
no idea the study you're talking about, but it would not surprise me.
mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm. So you're a co-founder of Recovering from Religion. Is that right?
No, I'm the founder. There is
Oh,
no
you
co
are the founder.
the founder, right? There wasn't anybody else there when I was founding it.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, it's all right. Somewhere, way back when, somebody put that I was a co-founder, and I think that probably came. I don't know. Probably came from another organization that does have a co-founder, but no, we don't have a co-founder. At the same time, it takes a hell of a lot more than me to run Recovery from Religion. So
Oh yes.
I may be the founder, but there's 200 other people making this organization what it is, not me alone.
That's obvious from your website, which I'll put up in a minute. But for the moment, would you like to tell us something about what RFR does?
Well, we do a myriad of things, just a lot of different services. Recovery from Religion is an organization that helps people deal with the consequences of leaving religion, any religion. So, whether you're Hindu or Mormon, Baptist or Catholic, we're here to help you. And what we know and we've seen in our own research and training is there are patterns that we see of techniques and methods that religions use to indoctrinate each their victims, and I will use that term seriously. And from those techniques, if you want to get out of them, deconvert, it requires some mental energy and it requires some techniques. It requires some outside help oftentimes. So, because somebody who is living within the confines of a religious construct is trapped cognitively oftentimes. They can't see their way out, and we're here to help them find their way out. Now, we are not a deconstructing or deconverting organization. That is not our purpose. We're simply here to help people ask questions and find their own way. Now, that's really important because we're not out to make anybody an atheist. That's not our goal. Our goal is to help people find their own answers. We will even help you find another church if you're not happy with the one you're in now. Now, from some of I'm an atheist, as you probably know, John, and some of my atheist friends get really pissed off when I say, we'll even help you find another church. Well, that's because we take our mission really seriously. We're here to provide hope, healing, and support. Those are the three things: hope, healing, and support. Where you find that is up to you. We do not dictate where you find it. For many of us, leaving the church entirely and religion entirely and being an atheist was the solution, but it's not the solution for everybody, and we're not trying to dictate that. And I think you'll find if you ever chat in or call into one of our chat lines or helplines that our agents are really well trained to keep their own values, their own beliefs out of the conversation, which is hard to do. So that requires training. And John, we train all of our agents very carefully. We supervise all of our agents, and we take phone calls and we take chats. You can go right there. You can see on the lower right-hand corner of our webpage a little phone button, and on the lower left-hand, a little chat button. You hit either one of those, and you'll be able to talk on a phone or talk by text with one of our agents. And we cover 16 time zones. We have volunteers literally from Australia to South Africa to New Zealand to England. We've got people on 16 different time zones. So we can cover phone calls and chats pretty much 24 hours a day with our volunteer base. And then we have small group meetings that meet face to face in coffee shops and things. Well, obviously that's not happening with COVID, but right now we have about 55 groups around the world, mostly, of course, in North America. But we've got them in Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom. We've got some that we think might get started up in Spain. We really expanded internationally in the last couple of years. We've been doubling in size about every year, maybe even more so this year. COVID has really had a huge impact on recovering from religion.
Yes.
Because we can't have face-to-face meetings, so now we're doing everything online. Well, if you got a meeting in Atlanta, Georgia that used to meet together, now they have to meet online. Well, somebody from England could join that group.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's that kind of internationalized some of our efforts even more.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah.
Well, we very often get viewers from Canada, South Africa, and America itself. We don't often get live viewers from Australia because it's the middle of their night.
Right.
It's very early in the morning where they are, depending which side of Australia they're in.
One of the things we've done since the advent of COVID was having a Monday night talk. And anybody's welcome to come to the Monday night talks. It's called RFRX, kind of like TEDx, only it's RFRX. And we have a very good speakers on various topics every Monday night. Last Monday night, I was the speaker, and I was talking about religious trauma syndrome and what causes it and how you treat it psychologically. The week before that, we had a very well-known sex therapist, Dr. Stephen Davidson out of Florida, who was talking on sexual integrity. And as you can see there, Yasmin Mohammed talked with us a few weeks ago, and Mandisa Thomas talked on the Black religious experience. And I mean, it's just every Monday, some new interesting. Jenna Selby, I'm seeing, just came by. She's been on the program about 3 times. That one you see there, Ito Utini, wow, that was one of the most amazing RFRXs we've had since we started doing this about 8 months ago. She is blind. She's from Morocco, and her literally made it to the United States, went to the University of Arkansas. I mean, just her story is just almost unbelievable. But that's the kind of people we're getting. And the folks you see right there in this next one, Lloyd Evans and Sherry. Sherry's from Australia. And of course, Lloyd, I believe, is in Croatia right now or somewhere like that. So they're on the opposite sides of the planet, but they came to talk to us. Yeah, I think Lloyd was 3 o'clock in the morning or something when he was talking. Yeah. So we have a lot of services, John, that your listeners may, even if they don't need the services, they may know people. They may have family members or friends that have been traumatized by religion, or a child who's being thrown out of their house because they're gay, or they're being forced to go to church by their Catholic parents and they don't want to go. I mean, there's lots of things that come up with respect to religion, and we're here to help, not telling the answers, but help them find the answers.
Yes.
And our resource pages are phenomenal. They're encyclopedic. You think of one problem somebody would have leaving a religion, and I guarantee you, we probably got a dozen books or articles on that same subject. And we have a whole team that just does nothing but look for resources. That's their whole job.
I was impressed when I started to look at your website. It's huge, isn't it? And the number of staff you've got on there and volunteers and experts is fantastic.
We have the most amazing volunteer group, John. They're just every day. We had a board meeting yesterday, and I'm learning new names of people I didn't even know were part of our but they're full-fledged volunteers. I mean, we just have so many people. I can't keep track of them all.
Yes.
And they're doing some great stuff with new software and web development, so that we can meet the challenges of the future.
I was going to ask you, before COVID, when it was possible to meet up and gather, did you have, at that time, I guess you were more US focused rather than globally. you've been driven global, like all the universities, and because of COVID.
Actually, no, we were very international before COVID. COVID did not increase that piece.
Oh,
RFRX on Monday night
Hmm.
became international very quickly.
yes.
But oh no, we've had people in South Africa, in Germany, Australia for years. That is not new. We have right now, I think we have 5 very active volunteers just from Australia, and they've been involved, some of them for a year or 2 with us.
Wow.
So COVID hasn't impacted that part of our operation as much. If anything, it's helped us reach out even more internationally. So that in that case, you're probably right.
Yeah, good. So going back a few years, then at the beginning of your organization, when it was national, did you find that most of your clients, I'm not sure whether that's the right word, came from a particular region? I'm thinking of, did they come from the Bible Belt, perhaps?
Well, the Bible Belt's kind of hard to define in the United States. I know they have a Bible Belt in Australia. I think it's called Queensland.
Well, it doesn't seem to be anywhere rural, does it?
Yeah, it does. Because
if you go to California, the cities on the coast are
right.
very enlightened, should we say. But if you go a few miles inland to the countryside, even in Silicon Valley, which to European eyes is a funny shaped valley. It's a wide plain. It's not a V shape at all.
Yeah, right.
But you don't have to stray far off the coastal roads to meet real right wing, backward thinking.
Well, that's true of almost any area of any country. I mean, there's a Bible Belt, so-called, in India. There's places where it's very conservative religious.
Yes.
And so I don't think that's unusual. It's almost always the less developed and the more rural areas of any country. But yes, the answer to the question is in kind of. We do and still do see a lot of people coming to us desperate for help because they're totally surrounded in rural Georgia by Baptists and they no longer believe it,
Yes.
Or they're totally surrounded by fundamentalist Lutherans in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Now, you do not think about Wisconsin, at least in the United States, as a Bible Belt, but there are people there. In Manitoba, we get people from Manitoba, Canada, that say, everybody around me is a Pentecostal, and
Utah with the Mormons.
Well, Utah, that's a special case. We get a lot of people calling and chatting in with us from Utah. So yes, we do get them, and partly because people have no resources. If you live in New York City and you're raised in a Baptist, you're probably bumping shoulders with people every day that could help you see a different perspective on life, a different worldview, but not in Alabama. Nobody is an atheist down there, or at least an out atheist in some of the rural areas.
Yes, I understand. This may be out of date information, but I understand if you did come out as an atheist in that part of the world, you might find it difficult to get a job or difficult to find accommodation.
It is somewhat true in some areas of the country. There are spots, for example, Huntsville, Alabama is like the most liberal area of the whole state. And it's partly because NASA has a gigantic facility there with lots and lots of engineers. And of course, other companies come in there, and they have a lot of engineers, say from India there, or from Pakistan. And they're now citizens of the United States, maybe, or they're in there on some kind of a visa for work. But so there's a lot of variety in some place like that. And whether you're an atheist or not is not nearly as important as it is down in Birmingham, Alabama, or Tuscaloosa, rather. Tuscaloosa is probably a better example. But that's the United States. It's not unlike other countries in like India, I don't think.
It's Yeah.
And we do get chats from India, but here's the real killer, and almost literally killer. We get chats from Saudi Arabia. We get chats from Pakistan.
Yeah.
And we have a protocol that we insist on people using, our clients, so they remain safe.
Yes.
Because if you can get your head cut off in France,
Yes.
you can certainly get your head cut off in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia
Yes.
for much less,
Mm.
much less. Yeah.
Yes.
We refer those people to other organizations like Atheist Republic, and there's some other organizations that are good at helping people escape or get resources. We can't provide material resources to people, but we can certainly provide them with support, contacts, other contacts, and stuff like that.
Yes. Yes. It would require the wealth of Fort Knox to be able to provide financial support for all the masses of people who find themselves in victimized situations regarding the country, the religion of their country.
Right. The hope is, and we've all seen this in literally in the last 10 years, that the internet is just opening up people's ability to reach out and find new resources. And we early on recognized that resources are going to be the foundation for all of recovery from religion. Because there's nowhere else on the planet that I know of that's tried to put together all the resources, as many resources as are available about leaving religion, any religion. It can be Islam or Mormonism, we don't care. And nobody's put all this together in one spot. And that's the value of our library, our resources, because we've got it all in one spot, and we're continuing to update it and add new things and add new religions. I mean, there's, you name it, there's so many religions. You could have a special page just for every religion practically on how to get out or how to deal with the consequences, like Scientology, for example, or some of these cults. I mean, there's a new cult popping up every day, and
Yes.
some of these cults are hideous. They're horrible, and they really hurt people.
Yes. Well, is it the Huttites or the Hutterites or the Mennonites that are very prescriptive? They almost pin down their children to their rules.
Yeah, the John Hus was the founder, but they're actually not. They're actually called Hutterites. Hut. But I don't ask me why. I've forgotten the reason. But yeah, the Hutterites are pretty primitive, as are the Amish and some brands of Mennonites, and they live on a farm and they don't have electricity in their house, and they've got rules. And each community, at least in the United States and somewhat in Mexico, these are very insular communities that have been there for 100, 150 years sometimes.
Yes.
And they're also very inbred, which is a problem.
Yes.
And you literally have to leave your community and go 100 miles away to the next community just to find a potential partner.
Yes.
And they've got all sorts of rules and rituals around that.
Yes.
But yeah, we have quite a few around various parts of the Midwest, of course, in Pennsylvania, and they drive buggies. They still have horses and buggies.
Yes.
That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The kids are literally locked into it, except when they turn about 16, they're allowed to go out and sow their wild oats. And then if they decide they like it out there, they stay and they never talk to their family again the rest of their life.
Yes. Yes.
And almost all of them come back because they're totally unprepared for the real world.
Yes. Yes.
They have an 8th grade education and they've never had to deal with anything.
Yes.
So it's a great way to trap them and keep them there forever.
Yes. Yes. Well, education is the key to enlightenment, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
And if you deny it, which is what they do in a lot of cults, in fundamentalist Islamic countries, they don't educate the girls, I understand.
Yeah. So I see a question here from your Facebook user. Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
I have never, for one, let's just discuss religious trauma before I answer the question. The question is, has anyone you ever helped taken previous religious places of worship to court? due to the trauma they've experienced. I am not aware of any that actually take them to court, although you could say the sex scandals of the Catholic Church and the Baptist Church and other churches, the Mormon Church, they have been successfully sued, but not for just the generalized trauma, more for the specific trauma and misbehavior of the leadership in sexual abuse. So in that sense, yes, I've seen it, but the whole notion of religious trauma was coined about 10 years ago by Dr. Maureen Winnell, who runs an organization called Journey Free that we work with very closely, and we're very supportive of Dr. Winnell and her book, Leaving the Fold. I will recommend that book. So many of our clients find that book really helpful to them. So Dr. Winnell coined the term religious trauma because she was noticing that what looks like PTSD from, say, a soldier coming back from Iraq or a child who experienced abuse and some domestic violence kind of thing, it looks a lot the same as what people experience when they leave religion. Yes. And so we've been studying this pretty carefully. There's a lot more to be done. There's not much science on it just yet. However, trauma looks the same, whether it's, I don't mean the same in the sense of identical. I mean, the similarities between someone who experienced trauma, say, watching a family member get murdered, going to Iraq and seeing people get killed as a soldier, or watching or being beaten by your own parents for not learning your Bible lessons at 5 years old. All of those things look remarkably similar.
Yes.
And you can even go on the United States CDC site and search for adverse childhood experiences and take a little survey. Any of your viewers can do this anywhere they are in the world.
Yes.
Take the adverse childhood experiences survey, and you might, if you score high enough, it might indicate that you're dealing with some kind of trauma from your childhood, because a great deal of trauma comes from childhood. That's not to say adults don't. We know that, for example, in wartime, but a lot of trauma comes through childhood. And what we're here to say is a good deal of that trauma is caused by religion. And nobody wants to talk about that. The American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the DSM-5, nobody has taken this seriously and looked at it and said, how is religion hurting people? It's almost a taboo topic. And we're here to say, we're not going to let that be taboo. We are going to out loud talk about how does religion fuck up people's lives.
Yeah. Well, I remember my mother telling me, when you're a guest at a dinner table, don't talk about religion or politics.
Right. Well,
that's an indictment, isn't it, of the fact that these are contentious issues that need to be sorted out.
Right. Well, if I don't remember who it was, somebody said, find out what you can't talk about, and you know what controls you.
That's Voltaire, I believe. Or
Voltaire, right. Okay.
He's one of the people who's been probably incorrectly attributed to.
Right, yeah.
On the subject of trauma and what is it, the soldiers come back with PTSD.
Right.
I have a private hypothesis about that, because one of the things that I often get invited to debate or to blog about is the source of morality. Because, of course, the theists, the believers, always think that it's coming down from their God, not from anybody else's God, of course, but it's dispensed by their God. But I'm an ex-teacher, biology mostly, so my inclination is to look for an explanation for it out of evolution. And I think that if experiencing trauma caused by horrendous events, like you were mentioning, somebody dying in the family, or a soldier watching colleagues being blown up, or whatever, I think if that results in a mental trauma for us, that's indicative that we have evolved a behavior to abhor that sort of thing. Therefore, progressing on from that, we're sort of adapted to be decent towards one another.
Well, I would say that's kind of stretching. I won't disagree with it, but I think it's stretching some evidence.
I did say it was a private hypothesis. I can't claim that there's scientific evidence to back it up.
Well, I think the missing piece in your hypothesis is that there is a physiological change in the brain. Trauma is, and let me just say this in a very simple terms, trauma is change in the brain.
Yes.
And as you and I were talking about before we got on the air, we can see this change now. We have machines, fMRIs, and other ways of looking in the brain, and we can see changes in the amygdala. We can see the way the imbalances of the neurotransmitters in the brain. We can see it in the body as well. I mean, if you see an extremely large adrenal gland, if somebody has a large adrenal gland, that means that adrenal gland has been stimulated more than normal and is producing a lot more adrenaline.
Yep.
And it probably indicates some kind of stress in the environment.
Yep.
The body and the brain respond, but in a trauma situation, it's not just temporary. It is a permanent change, permanent in the sense of not easily changed back.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about something that's probably not an evolutionary adaptation, though parts of it could be. I'm not saying it can't, but I'm going to go back to Pavlov and early Pavlov's own work in Russia. What many people don't realize, there's a great book called The Battle for the Mind by William Sargent, who was an English psychiatrist with MI6, I believe he was, before he came to the United States in the 50s and worked for what became the CIA.
Yep.
And his research said, let's look at what Pavlov did with dogs after Stalin took over. Until Stalin took over, Pavlov's works were available to the West, but when Stalin took over, that got shut down.
Yes.
Yet Pavlov was still encouraged. Stalin liked Pavlov. Stalin wanted Pavlov to continue his research, even though Pavlov hated Stalin.
Yeah.
What Stalin did was put plants, graduate students, if you will, in his lab and allowed them to spy on him. And what Pavlov accidentally discovered was what we would now call post-traumatic stress disorder with dogs. You can create PTSD in a dog just by the kind of stress you put it in, and it is a permanent change in the dog's personality. The dog's personality will change, and it's probably, of course, he didn't have fMRIs to look at, but he could document that it was very difficult to retrain that dog.
Yeah.
And more importantly, that all the tricks, all the things the dog knew before it was exposed to this traumatic event, was lost. They lost all the training. And what he found, there's 4 different personality types among dogs, and he found that roughly one of them is easily traumatized. The other 2 are can be traumatized and then retrained. And then there's one that is highly resistant to traumatization and doesn't lose or can relearn rather rapidly. So if you just look at it that way, humans have 5 personality components. It's called the Big 5. And we don't have that kind of evidence on humans yet. And there may be there. I'm not as familiar with the literature. So, John, I think it's important to realize that trauma or experiences in the environment have different levels of trauma or trauma potential, largely based upon the personality of the person.
So you bring your own vulnerability to the situation.
Absolutely. That's why some soldiers come back from the most horrendous war experiences and don't seem to be affected by it, reintegrate back into civil society. And other soldiers are a basket case for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
Unless they get proper treatment, of course.
Mm. Well, this bodes ill for two things, doesn't it? It bodes ill for children who have experienced terrible circumstances early in life,
Yes.
whether it's been in a wealthy country but they've had very bad parenting, or whether it's been in a country like Syria, which has been undergoing terrible war. It bodes ill for their prospects, or for all of them, to recover from that event.
Right.
And it also doesn't hold out a great deal of hope for retraining criminals who they may have a mindset which is equally firm and difficult to shift. And that's been illustrated by, for example, the sad shooting in London on London Bridge a couple of years ago, when one of the researchers who believed that he could cure Muslims from their indoctrination. No, it's a radicalization. That's the word I need. And he ended up being shot, and his assistant. They were carrying out an attempt to unbrainwash these people, and it didn't work.
Well, that's a whole nother that's a whole nother rabbit hole. Criminal, yeah. Number one, especially in the United States, very few people in our criminal justice system get the treatment that might actually help them.
Yeah.
And so you put somebody in a situation where the best they can expect is pretty terrible. You're not going to change their behavior, because that behavior is adaptable. And talk about evolution. Always remember that people are evolving and responding to their environment. And if they're responding in a way that looks maladaptable to you and I, it may be perfectly adaptable in their environment. I mean, if I was living in an environment where shootings happen on a regular basis, carrying a gun and maybe eventually having to shoot somebody in self-defense even, or whatever. I'm not justifying, quote, immoral behavior. I'm trying to say that people
That's how you respond.
Yeah, people are responding to their environment. And I'm the first one to call the criminal justice system the worst treatment you can give somebody.
Yeah.
So let's acknowledge that those people have got a long way to go, but they need, if they were traumatized as children, we know that even from the Pavlov experiments, we know that with the proper treatment and care, and it takes a long time, but you can get that dog back up to speed.
Yeah.
And we know that from soldiers. One of my good friends, Dr. Hector Garcia, who wrote a great book called The Alpha God, his expertise is treating PTSD in soldiers coming back from Iraq, Iran, and so forth. And with the pioneering methodology of treating PTSD is under his supervision, and he's training psychologists all over the United States and probably other places too.
Yeah.
And we know that it's not hopeless, but you have to use the right treatment.
Yes.
And it's not available to everybody. And children, because it's so deeply ingrained at 5 years old or 6 years old, are going to take a lot of treatment.
Yes, because the brain is developing. It's sort of more plastic in the early years.
Absolutely is. And if you imagine you're in a household where everybody's religious and you're constantly being watched, and you're told you're going to hell if you masturbate, and you're doing whatever you normally would do as a human being, and yet your body is your greatest enemy, and there's no privacy, there's no escape, and if you violate a rule, you get beaten. That is not unlike being in a war zone.
No.
For a 5-year-old kid. There is no safety. There's no safe person. Your parents are the source of your terror.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's heinous. I agree.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting pioneering experiments regarding punishment, other than imprisonment, going on in Finland, I think, one of the Scandinavian countries, where instead of imprisoning the criminals, they're befriending them, which is something that may not have happened to them prior to that in their lives.
Right. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that experiment, but it sounds like a good experiment to try.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I actually speak from very firsthand experience. My first 10 years of my career was with the criminal justice system as a psychologist inside a prison. So I know whereof I speak, and it was a terribly dehumanizing experience for the inmates and not much better for the professionals in their difficult environment. Not because the people are difficult necessarily, but because it's just such an unnatural environment for human beings.
Yes. Well, I did a couple of years at a boarding school for emotionally and behaviorally disturbed children.
Oh, okay.
Many of whom had narrowly escaped being imprisoned in the junior offenders clink.
Right.
And so it wasn't quite your level of experience, but they were showing very disturbed conditions.
Right.
They just insulted and offended each other and the teachers and everyone all the time. That was their means of communication.
Right.
They kept referring to each other's mothers as whores, for example. And this became so common that they didn't have to say the whole sentence. They didn't have to say your mum's a whore. They could just say your mum, and everybody knew what they meant.
Shorthand.
And according to them, everybody smelt. So if they accused me of smelling, I used to say, do you like it? It's called musk.
Well, we've got a lot to go there, but that's really not the focus of what I am doing every day now with Recover from Religion. We have enough trauma without putting people in prison. In many ways, a child imprisoned in a family of fundamentalist Muslims or Christians is being traumatized. They are imprisoned.
They're in jail.
A child in Pakistan right now who wants to think on their own, who wants to get on the internet and learn something, could be severely punished for questioning Islam.
Yes, absolutely.
A girl that wants to simply be herself and be what normal girls are could have her head chopped off in Pakistan.
Well, AAI are currently trying to rescue 3 Muslims that are imprisoned in northern Nigeria for blasphemy.
Yes, I know. And good on you. I'm supportive of that effort. Yeah.
That crime, blasphemy, that crime that harms nobody except a non-evidential God.
Right.
Who apparently, although he's omnipotent, can't defend himself against a few words. But you mentioned something about religion. I can't remember the phrase you used, but the word choice or choosing came up. And this is something that I get engaged in because a lot of the people I debate with say you have no choice. You are born into a religion, and then they don't use the word indoctrinated, but inducted into it in some way, which may include genital mutilation, for example. And then that's it. You can't. Your choice has gone at that stage. But some of them manage to unchoose, don't they? They become apostates. And some of them manage to choose a different religion. I mean, the archetypal example would be Cassius Clay, who was born into a Baptist family.
Right.
Turned into a Muslim and had to rename himself Muhammad Ali. So my contention is that religion is a choice. What do you think about that?
Well, let's ask, did you choose to learn to speak English?
No.
At the time that you're acquiring language, you're also acquiring, in many cultures, in many families, the religion.
Yes.
So the religion and the language are being acquired at the same time.
Yes.
And so you didn't one day wake up and say, Mom and Dad, why aren't you teaching me Chinese? Why aren't you teaching me German?
No.
It was just what's in your environment.
Yes.
So to that degree, you did not choose to be an English speaker
No.
any more than you chose to be an Episcopalian or an Anglican or a Baptist or whatever. So I'm going to agree with to some degree, it is not a choice. It's just your environment.
Yes.
Now, what I've seen, and I've researched this for decades, literally. I wish I had better, more solid scientific evidence on this. But here's my hypothesis, and I think it's a testable hypothesis. I think there are personality configurations that are more resistant to indoctrination, and personality characteristics and configurations that are less resistant.
Yeah.
It goes back to what I said about Pavlov. Of the 4 different configurations, one was very resistant and one was very susceptible, and then the other 2 were somewhere in between. I think humans are the same way.
Yes.
There are certain personality tests I've used over my career, and some of the configurations I see over and over and over again in atheists.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them in the people that remain loyal to their religion for the rest of their life. So I can just say that if you score this way on this personality test, you may have been born as a Baptist, but you will probably find your way out when you become an adult. However, if you score on this other way on the same test, you born a Baptist, you will probably never find your way out.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's a choice or not. I think the whole word choice is suspicious. So I don't think we choose a lot. I think a lot is just how we adapt to a given environment.
Yeah. Careful, we'll be talking about free will next.
Well,
I wonder if these different susceptibilities of personality correlate with your vulnerability to being hypnotized.
There's some evidence for that as well. It goes back quite a few years. Of course, there's controversy around the notion of hypnosis in itself.
Yeah.
But now that we have ways to look at what's going on in the brain during altered states of consciousness, yes, there are some personalities that are more susceptible to altered states of consciousness. It's that simple. That's not a controversial statement for me to make.
Yeah.
When you go into a church, and I doubt if you visited the number of churches that I've visited or observed them, but as a psychologist, I go into a Pentecostal church and watch. I see hundreds of people going into altered states of consciousness that are not unlike what I could produce in a clinical setting in my own office as I put somebody into a so-called trance to help them get over smoking or deal with a phobia or something like that. So yeah, there's the people who are not susceptible to that particular approach to creating an altered state of consciousness are probably going to be resistant to that environment and will probably get out at the earliest opportunity.
Yeah.
They may leave the Pentecostals, because they don't want to speak in tongues and roll in the aisles.
No.
They still may want to remain religious. So, they become a Methodist or an Episcopalian or an Anglican, Church of Canada, whatever. Something religion light, or Christianity light.
Right. Yes. LITE.
Yeah, LITE.
So while they're all happy clappy, you're standing at the back like some sort of gooseberry, are you?
I have had so many people. We have almost daily, John. I sometimes wish I could just put our chats online and let anybody watch the chats live. I wish I could do that, but of course we can't for confidentiality reasons. But people come to us and say, I never believed the stuff that my parents taught me. I never wanted to roll in the aisles. I never wanted to speak tongues. I always was suspicious of this. And that's probably the personality characteristics that allowed them, they are of that personality type that allowed them to resist it. They didn't know that. They just know it never took. I'm one of those people. It never took with me. I somehow escaped because it just never quite took.
There's a thing. Are all psychologists resistant?
No, we have some psychologists are very religious. Some are very spiritual. So no, I won't say that. There's a couple other personality configurations that tend to gravitate towards social work and psychology and helping professions. And sometimes I find them to be quite susceptible to things like New Age ideas or ways. They may not be as susceptible to traditional religious stuff, but they're still susceptible to irrational ideas.
And they'll buy from Gwyneth Paltrow.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty common. I unfortunately, just because you've got a PhD in psychology does not mean you're not susceptible to infection with infectious ideas, irrational ideas. Yeah.
We've got another question here about the future plans. What do you think about that?
Well, I tell you, we have massive future plans. We have really expanded recently. We've had some generous gifts from some donors that allowed us to really reach out and get more exposure on social media. And I'll just say, if anybody wants to help us, we're always ready to accept your donations at recoverfromreligion.org. Hit the donate button.
We will put links to it in the comments. So what about?
Well, I wanted to answer that question, and that is that we are expanding internationally in a new way. We've already expanded, of course, but the next thing we're doing is we're trying to really push for the secular therapy project to become much more international. And I haven't talked about that. I know we're running out of time, but that's our big plans to push. The second thing we're going to do is we're pushing to challenge schools of psychology that are doing very poor training and not challenging irrational thinking, graduating Christian counselors whose real job is not to help people, but to get people back in church. We're challenging. They get a full licensed PhD in psychology, for example, from Liberty University or Regents University or one of those universities, and they're no more qualified than the man in the moon, and yet they can have a license. And people that the average layperson does not realize they're being they're not being treated properly. So that's our future plans, or one of them.
Yep, good. So you reminded me when you said about how it takes training so that you help people find their own direction rather than impose your own propaganda.
Right.
That reminded me of street epistemology.
Well, you might not be surprised that Anthony Magnabosco, one of the great practitioners, is one of our main volunteers and has volunteered for 5 years. And we don't require our agents to learn street epistemology, but we strongly encourage them to. And it does take time and practice. But our agents, I'll tell you, our best agents are the ones that have learned street epistemology. It's just almost that simple. And of course, a new agent doesn't know it. It takes a while to learn it. And we provide a lot of training and a lot of oversight, supervision, and feedback for our agents. Because we found you can't argue someone out of their religion.
No. All you do is alienate them, and then they dig in.
Exactly. And so we find the street epistemology is a very good set of skills. So along with Socratic questioning, which is a little broader than simply street epistemology.
Yes. So what about the clergy project? They're in the same business as you in a more specialized field, though, aren't they?
They are. They are not officially connected to us or with them, but we work very closely together. Minutes before I connected with you, I was talking to one of the clergy project members, and we support them and they support us. They have a different mission, of course, and they have about 1,000 people in their current organization that are all former ministers or currently preaching. Or still ministers.
We can't get out, can they? They've got no alternative income.
Exactly. We do get people calling us up that are ministers, and we refer them right on to the clergy project.
Yeah.
But there's a whole segment of people that need our help that are related to them. The wife, the children,
Yes. Yeah.
the spouses of the ministers, they have nowhere to go. So
Yeah.
we have a special place just for them at Recovering from Religion.
All right.
If you come to us and chat in and say, I'd like to join your RFR community, we can admit you to our private community that's carefully monitored because we don't want anybody getting hurt.
No.
And if you're an ex-minister's wife or a child of a preacher, we can help you and we can get you into that community. We also have a whole group of other things like ex-Mormons, ex-Baptists, ex-Muslims. All those are in our community too. So if you want to join one of us and talk to other people who've gone through the same thing you are, contact us.
I'll make sure that the connections are in the comments.
Good. Thank you. Well, they have to come through us to get there, but yeah.
Yes. The links. Yes. So, Darrel, I could talk to you all night, but you're right. We have come to the end of our allotted hour, and I'm cheating. I've been on the beer throughout.
Well, it's 3:00 where I'm at, so it's too early to start drinking.
Too soon for you. Yes. The sun hasn't gone over the yardarm where you are yet.
Yeah, nope, hasn't.
That's our nautical expression. But before I thank you, I want to do a quick commercial because for the benefit of our audience, next week we have Professor Mike Benton, who is the head of the paleontology department of Bristol University. And he's currently in the news because he has put out a paper on the subject of a new extinction, which was hitherto unknown, but has been discovered. It was at the beginning of the dinosaur era, and it gave them the opportunity to become the primary creatures on the planet. So that will be a very interesting event, a very interesting show to join into next week. So please, everyone, will you subscribe? What have I got to say here? Like, subscribe, and comment, and whatever it is that YouTubers are supposed to say that I'm very bad at. But do it anyway. And Darrel, thank you very much. You've been fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Take the rest of the day off.
All right. I got work to do.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.